highest of honors to. We also extend. We also extend the highest of honors to all Noble Jew Ali student followers here and there. We thank the brothers here for inviting me to this special occasion. I am humbled. I am grateful. I'm indeed blessed to be present amongst you and to follow up on the question asked to me by the host. I was arrested at the age of 15 in 1986. I was sent to the juvenile justice system for the purpose of clarity and understanding for our public and those who are viewing. Important that you understand that the juvenile justice have as its purpose rehabilitation and reformation.
Okay.
And treatment. It is absent punishment.
Right.
The criminal justice system, a system designed by adults for adults, is designed solely for three criteria points.
Okay.
That's deterrence, incapacitation, and punishment.
Okay.
The prosecutor who handled my case as a juvenile believed that with the conditions of our society at the time, which was inundated with crack cocaine,
right,
and many of us were absorbed into that reality, thought that some of us were hardened criminals and deserved to be funneled through the criminal justice system.
Right.
So he sought what is commonly known as a waiver. The waiver is designed to show to the judge who judges your case that you are unfit and cannot be treated in the juvenile justice system. That you are, according to many of them, a super predator.
Okay.
Not just a predator, but you're a super predator worthy of incarceration in the criminal justice system for life. So, the waiver was filed by the prosecutor, the juvenile justice system. We had a hearing. It's called a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 is the probable cause hearing. Phase 2 is the hearing that they take all the evidence to determine whether or not they're going to waive jurisdiction over you to the criminal justice system.
Yes, sir.
Frankly, I have to admit that it is more of a farce than anything because the decisions have already been made.
Right.
That young African males of Moorish descent was a threat to the power structure at that time, similar to what you find in scriptures.
Right. Absolutely.
Where Pharaoh and Herod sent out a decree in hopes that they would destroy and kill the coming Christ or the Messiah.
Right.
And his name was Jesus. As you would say, targeting young boys at that time.
Right.
That story is prophetic.
Definitely.
And it speaks to the African males in our society here in the United States.
Right.
So
well, the same thing was beforehand did in Moses' time, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is
a common
pattern.
theme. It's a pattern and theme that
Okay.
constantly goes on.
Right. So this is no strange happening.
No, it's no strange happenings. As you already know, law
Right.
governs all events. Right. So, in the 80s,
right,
as they did in the 70s,
okay,
with the heroin era, with the crack cocaine era, they sent out this decree,
right,
to incarcerate all young African boys of Moorish descent,
right,
who they felt was a threat to the power structure, namely corporate America.
Okay.
We saw some of this played out in recent months in Chicago, Illinois, where they sent out the same decree through Trump. The federal system came in, started incarcerating people.
Right.
So what you saw was a school to prison pipeline.
Right.
The prosecutor were successful in convincing the judge that I was beyond repair,
Okay.
that I could not be redeemed or treated in the juvenile justice system.
Right.
Now, I had never ever in my entire life actually been in the juvenile justice system.
Okay.
So I don't know what criteria that they were using to make that judgment,
Right.
right? Because I still could have been in there at least for a minimum of 3 years.
Right.
At the most, 5.
Right.
Up until I was at the age of 21. At any rate, the prosecutor was, again, as I pointed out, successful in ensuring that I be sent to the criminal justice system.
Right.
That is the worst thing ever that you can do to a child.
Right.
But it is indicative of what is going on even in our society today.
Okay, so let me ask a question here. You pointed out that this is the worst thing that could happen to a child, correct? And
Yes.
My question to you is, how did you? Because this is your first.
That's a very good question. It's very complicated. But what I would say, the one thing that got me through is I tapped into who our ancestors were.
Okay. Okay.
And some of those ancestors, as I found out through observation and study, and individuals like yourself mentoring me,
Yes, sir.
that was in the Wayne County Jail, or even for that matter, in the juvenile justice system.
Yes, sir.
So I was made aware of Islam
Islam.
and Islamism.
Okay.
And through this divine tree of
Okay.
Islamism, I was brought face to face with some of our most extraordinary ancestors, including Jesus the Messiah.
Okay.
So, as a little boy and seeing my story mirror their story,
Right.
including Noble Jew Ali, who happened to be a young man, when he formed the Moorish Science Temple of America and this Moorish Divine National Movement, I immediately identified with them.
Okay.
And I used them as the basis for my transformation.
Okay.
They faith became my faith.
Okay. So let me ask this here. Was there some key word or was some what really resonated with you about Prophet Noble Drew Ali?
Well, one thing we already talked about moments ago is that Noble Drew Ali was 15, 16 as a teenager,
Okay.
coming into the knowledge of himself and the knowledge of Allah.
Oh, okay.
When he was presented to me, I can see myself in him
Right.
because he looked just like you and I,
Praise Allah.
right? But he wasn't like you and I.
Right.
Just like, although Moses was in Pharaoh's house, Moses was not like the slaves.
That's right.
You ain't gonna free no slaves being one who think like a slave.
Okay.
So Noble Drew Ali, although he's in the modern day Pharaoh house, he didn't think like the typical so-called Negro or the typical so-called black. He was a free man.
Right.
Intellectually, he was free. He knew who he was. And I can identify with that. Here's a man who came to a people in the United States, a people that was rejected and a people that no one else wanted.
Right.
And he said, I'll take them.
Right.
And that resonated with me.
Okay.
And so I used that to tap into,
Okay.
because he did say, the garb I have on represents power.
Right.
And if you follow me, you will have power with me.
Right.
So the garb that he had on wasn't his fez or his crescent pin. The garb that he was talking about was the garb of Allah and his ancestors.
Okay.
And he tapped into that source and pulled from it his strength and his power.
Okay.
And so, like a socket in the wall, I had to plug up
Right.
to get the electrical circuit to be able to move forward in a hostile terrain like the criminal justice system.
Right.
And so, yes, I was fortunate to be exposed to the teachers at a very early age
Right.
while I was in the county jail.
Okay.
Now, that does not mean that I still didn't wrestle with this notion of being a black man in American society.
Okay, that's key.
Because there was a psychological effect being raised as a child in a society that robbed you of your identity, your true identity as Moors.
Right.
One of the things that we must be made to understand, that black is a false identity.
Absolutely.
It replaced the real identity of our people. That's called identity theft.
Right.
So they stole.
That's true identity theft.
That's true identity theft.
That's right.
They stole our identity as Moors and Muslims.
Okay.
And replaced it with black and Christian.
Okay.
Now that's not to say anything negative about my Christian family.
Right.
And those who identify as black, because I love my family.
Absolutely.
And many of them helped me get through my incarceration.
Right.
But I'm giving you the history as we understand it with the slave trade and white supremacy racism on the stealing of our identity. That's why this Moorish thing to the American people seems kind of foreign.
Right.
But it's not foreign.
That's right.
Now, I am humbled and gracious to have unfolded in a very difficult environment.
Right.
But that says something about Prophet Noble Jew Ali and Allah himself.
Praise Allah.
When you understand that we are seeds of Allah
Yes.
and seeds of Noble Jew Ali, you also understand that no seed actually develops and grows in lightness. In fact, every seed develops in darkness.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm that seed that developed in the darkness of the criminal justice system.
Praise Allah.
And I'm now coming into the light of who I am by the wisdom and the work of Noble Jew Ali and Allah himself in the person
Right.
of Noble Jew Ali.
Okay.
So I credit him with my transformation
Praise Allah.
and the ancestors that he exposed me to that was linked to him.
Right.
Like Abraham,
Yes.
like Moses,
Yes.
like Jesus,
Some of the great fathers.
Denmark Vesey, Marcus Garvey, right? So those individuals resonated with me,
Right.
right? And so I was touched by their experiences,
Right.
and their experiences became my experience.
Okay.
Noble Jew Ali has a teaching where he says, out of the worst, the wise will find the means of good.
That's right.
It gets really no worse than the criminal justice system.
Absolutely.
But I transformed the criminal justice system or prison from an institution that was intended to destroy my soul and my spirit and use it as a facility, like a university, to heal
Praise Allah.
and to restore my identity.
But we know that's divine power. You know what you're describing is divine power, and so we know that the teachings. One thing that the Prophet Noble Jew Ali taught us, and it's a Moorish perspective, is that we, the Asiatics of America, we have an earthly and divine salvation.
Yes, indeed, bro.
And so to neglect either is a travesty.
It is.
And so what Noble Jew Ali has done is he's given us something to help us navigate through this journey of life and be successful, because it's obvious from the attitude that you had, it was based on something that was divine. Because you could have taken that and been bitter, been mad,
Yes. Initially, I was
corrupt.
Yeah.
But the prophet rejuvenated you.
Right.
He gave you life. How did you sustain it?
It is not easy when you when you understand the modus operandi of the prison industrial complex.
Explain that.
Well, the prison industrial complex, as it's presently constituted, is designed to destroy your spirit.
Okay.
Now, even in our society, there are only two types of people.
Right.
Some people who have a spirit of resolution,
Okay.
and they will not allow circumstances to shape and mold them.
Okay.
And they won't fall victim to those conditions.
Right.
In other words, they will rise above the conditions as they exist once they come into the knowledge of themselves.
Okay.
There are others on the other side of the spectrum who allow the system to weigh down on them and destroy their spirit.
Okay.
So you have broken men and women and unbroken men and women, whether they in the prison industrial complex or in society.
Okay.
Noble Drew Ali classified that as psychological bondage
Okay.
or mental slavery.
Right.
And it's the absence of an identity in what you just spoke about, an earthly and divine salvation.
Okay.
Now, so-called black people has mastered one of those.
Okay.
That's the earthly thing.
Absolutely.
They have been to the moon and back, so to speak.
Right.
We are dominant in sports and the entertainment industry.
Right.
And so, yeah, we have shown a propensity to master the physical aspects of society.
Right.
But what is missing, the missing link,
Right.
is a national identity,
Okay.
which means then, without it, there's an identity crisis.
Okay.
So it wasn't accidental that there was a TV show that was out, and probably still is, but I don't really watch television, that was called The Walking Dead.
Right.
It was symbolic of the masses of the people. And when you label somebody black and they identify with that black, they are inconsequentially saying they are the walking dead, the living dead. And so I, at some point in my life, identified with that reality as they did.
Okay.
And I had made it my own. And so it wasn't accidental that I had a brush with criminal law,
Right.
the juvenile justice system, and ultimately the criminal justice system.
Right.
Because as you already probably know, law governs all events.
That's right.
And unfortunately, as a child who didn't get proper nurturance in his identity of self and Allah, I deviated to the other side
Right. Right. Right.
of the law.
Absolutely.
And I had to pay a heavy price.
Right.
But through the presence of Noble Drew Ali in my life, I was able to resurrect myself.
Praise Allah.
Because as he teaches, when the will of man and the will of God is one, the resurrection is a fact.
Praise Allah.
And that resurrection takes place on 3 different levels.
Okay.
Spiritually, we are born spirit.
That's right.
We have a soul, and we live in a body.
That's right.
So the resurrection must take place on all 3 planes of life
Right.
for you to be a balanced human being.
So if one's absent,
You're imbalanced.
and so the imbalance is what causes destruction.
Indeed.
Okay. And so when we examine the instructions, because these are holy and divine instructions here, and the more we get into it, you know, we know that man debates himself.
Indeed. Absolutely.
And so, but it was ordained to be in order to be the manifestation of what Allah wanted him to be.
Right.
So we understand that.
Now,
But when we get into this travesty of a nation of people in America whose minds have been conditioned to identify themselves as something less than their intent. Now you're in a whole ball game. That's a whole different ball game there, because you don't even know the rules to that game.
right.
You know, at least
Playing
when
somebody
you're
else's game.
you're all right. You playing somebody else's game, and you've identified yourself what somebody else has labeled you, and so the psyche is messed up. And even though Mama could have good intentions, Big Mama, great intentions,
Absolutely.
on their knees, praying, speaking in tongues, doing all of these things that they've been taught to do in order to try to make a difference, and yet there's something absent.
They fall short.
They fall short.
Yeah.
And they fall short because of the fact I was talking to an aunt of mine earlier, and she said, honey, I've been praying for my son for 35 years, and I just hope that he get this thing right. And the first thing that hit me is that one thing is you off balance and off if you believe that Allah, your God, is concerned with time. Right. See, that you off right there, because He ain't concerned about no time. They ain't got nothing to do with
that's
God.
A man-made.
That's a man-made thing. Right. And that's so right. that understanding, along with the identification, you got the whole game wrong. Everything that you doing, I read in the scriptures where Jesus said that your prayer will be amiss. And I examined, what is that? What does amiss mean? And it's meaning that the energy that you putting forth can't connect to the universe based on a lack of idea. You don't even know who you are in the scheme of things because you're searching for something outside of you that's in you. Allah. And so when you miss that, then it's a crapshoot. It's a crapshoot.
And it's ironic that you said that.
Right.
When I began to examine scriptures,
okay,
particularly the Holy Bible,
okay, right.
So the first thing is attempting to do is develop in you mindset,
right,
where you have a functional relationship with the divine.
Right.
That's your first identity.
Okay. Makes sense.
Now, that metamorphosized into an earthly identity, but it's linked directly to the divine identity.
Right.
That's Moorish for us.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's that perspective.
Right. That's that perspective.
That's that perspective. Praise
now, that perspective of Moorish transcends American society and transcends thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
So, Moorish identity like a seed, and you crack that seed open, then you can get to all the power and the potential.
Right.
That will come once you align your mind with that seed identity.
Right.
Now, most so-called black people lack not only identity, and because they lack identity, they lack a purpose. And the divine creator does not create anything without purpose.
Praise Allah.
So when you have so-called black people walking around the streets today, and you ask them, what's up? And they say, I'm bored. I don't know what's really going on.
Right.
That means they lack purpose.
Absolutely.
And with the presence of Prophet Noble Jew Ali, he brought us purpose.
Right.
And he said our purpose not only is to uplift ourselves as a people, but it is to come into functional knowledge of who you are.
Right.
I am here by Allah's permission to teach you who you are.
Praise Allah. Praise Allah.
And that transcends time and space.
Absolutely. When you were talking about bored, I thought about there was an old wise man, and this young fella, he was trying to find his way, and he came to the wise man and he asked him. He said, "Man, how will I know, great wise man, when I'm a man?" And the wise man looked at him. He says, "When you stop being bored." And that's always resonated with me because the fact that once you understand self, there's so much, when there's time that you can be together, just you with your inner peace that Allah, man, there's a whole bunch of development there, and so I can understand where you're saying there, but I want to go to, we talked about these holy and divine instructions, and we're going to read chapter 2 because it's in correlation with what we're talking about. Yeah. And chapter 2 talks about the education of Mary and Elizabeth in Zoan, Egypt. And I want to focus tonight on instruction 7. It says, Elihu said, "It's not strange. There are no happenings. Law governs all events." And so, when I first heard this years ago, it was a cliche.
It was a cliche.
It was a cliche.
A slogan.
It was a slogan. And the more that I developed and started to meditate on that word, it started to make sense in every form and fashion of my life.
Yes, indeed.
You know, even the structure of the human body, you know, the flowing of the blood, you know, the rays that go off into our mind, the conditions that we find ourselves in, everything is based on law.
Everything.
Everything is based on law. And when I started studying more, and I found something out. Divinity is not compassed, or does it bow to law?
It transcends.
It transcends law.
Yes.
It transcends law.
Law is primary for man.
Right. And so when we figure that thing out there, because later on, you know, the things that when we talk about Jesus, the Messiah, and we talk about a resurrection, we're talking something beyond a law.
You're talking about something beyond.
Because when we look at the law, that's impossible to happen. It's impossible.
Unless you're talking about the law of love.
Now we're going somewhere now.
The law of creative life, right.
Now, so what
that's a spiritual law.
That's a spiritual law.
Right.
And so a spiritual law transcends anything, and when you look at it, it ain't strange.
Right.
Because there's an expectation of things when you're connected to divinity.
Absolutely.
You know, I look at you today, and I know that before the manifestation, there was a divine revelation that you would be here today.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, when man couldn't see, all he knew in 1985, 95, 2005, 2015, it was something that was governed by law. But you were able to see divinity based on the energy of Prophet Noble Drew Ali.
That's right. Yes. Yes, indeed. One of the things I discovered, like yourself, is our universe,
right,
function by and through laws.
Okay.
There's nowhere you can go in this universe and not be subject to law.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the law of gravity,
Yes,
the law of thermodynamics,
right,
or the law of cause and effect.
Okay then.
Right?
Yes.
So for every action, there's an opposite of reaction.
Right.
So one of the things I don't do is that I don't blame the criminal justice system,
Right.
law enforcement, the government for the existing conditions that I experience. Now that doesn't mean they're absolved of responsibility,
Absolutely.
but they couldn't do what they did if I didn't trigger their coming into my life. Meaning there are millions of young people in our society.
Right.
There are thousands and thousands of youth under the age of 18.
Right.
Not all of them are incarcerated.
Right.
Not all of them are having to brush with the law.
Absolutely.
But I did. So what is Allah trying to reveal to me?
Right.
See, in the worst of conditions, that's when Allah is at his best.
Absolutely.
He can take something that seems nothing and transform it and make it into something.
Right.
And so earlier you talked about being bitter.
Right.
Well, bitter is an emotion that's relegated to somebody who don't really know who he is.
Absolutely.
And that means you have to believe in the concept of bitterness and buy into it and allow it to control your life.
Okay.
That means you're not a bay and you're not a eel.
Praise
It means
Allah.
you're not a creator and you're not a governor.
Absolutely.
And somebody is creating your conditions and your thinking for you.
Okay.
And that was me for a long time.
Right. So you're like a leaf in the wind.
Yeah, you like what they
You
call
blown
it.
anyway.
Yeah, you like a dummy with a, yes,
Okay.
absolutely,
Absolutely.
with a ventriloquist behind you.
As you were saying that, Brother Alan Bay, what came to me was I thought about chapter 7, you know, because the fact, see, one of the things about being able to defy the things that are happening by power is to understand the correlation, not the relation,
The correlation.
the correlation between you and Allah. Because when you understand that, and you understand that the only way that you are capable of changing your conditions
began to examine the lives of the prophets
Yes.
from Adam
Yes.
all the way to Jesus. And
Right.
in fact, Jesus is a little bit much more than a prophet.
Right.
He is the Messiah and the Christ,
Okay.
which means he is anointed with power.
Okay.
To do what? To crush Satan.
Right.
To crush the lower self.
Okay.
And so when I examine their lives, what I notice is that they were made strong because of a personal relationship with God.
Okay.
Jesus said, let's cut out the middleman
Right.
and let's go straight to the power source where everything comes from.
Okay.
And his name is Allah, because
Right.
Jesus spoke Semitic language.
Absolutely.
So he said Shalom or Islam,
Right.
which means by nature, Jesus was a Muslim.
Absolutely.
By nature, he was a Muslim.
Absolutely.
And if you examine scripture from Genesis to Revelations, it almost always starts out in identity.
Absolutely.
The identity in Allah and the identity in yourself. What is that self? That's your tribal self. That's your racial self. That's your ethnic self. That was the very central component that was taken from the so-called blacks.
Okay. Okay. And so,
And Kunta Kinte represented that. That's why he was named Token.
that's why they had to change their name.
They had to change the name.
And so, what I connect to is when we examine this chapter 7, right? It tells us that I'm gonna read this here. It says the ethers cause these powers to be, and thought of Elohim, of angel, man, and other thinking things direct the force. Now, what it's telling us is that when you know who you are, when you really understand that Allah is not above, below, but within,
That's right.
then you stop searching for something outside of yourself for your surge. You plug in with self.
Real power.
And therefore, my mind and my thoughts can direct the force.
Well, if you read the writings of Jesus,
Yes.
even in the Bible,
Right.
he talks about us being gods in human form.
Absolutely.
And if you go to John chapter 10, 34, 35,
Right.
he said, did not your father say all of you are children of the Most High? All of you are gods?
Ye are God.
Right. Now, when you examine the word God, which in this context is a Greek word,
Yes, it is.
right? And you decode the word, God means one who is a ruler,
Right.
right? Now, most so-called black people are not rulers. They are being ruled.
Absolutely.
And who are they rulers? Well, that don't need to be explained. What's understood don't need to be explained,
Right.
right? But they're ruled that way because they lack self-sufficient knowledge of themselves.
Absolutely.
That's the one missing link that Jesus brings. He said the kingdom of God is within you,
Absolutely.
which means all real power
Yes, sir.
come from within.
That's it.
Any other power is nothing but an illusion. If it does not come from within, it's an illusion. You think you land like that,
Right.
but you're not really land like that.
Absolutely. Praise
So
God.
when the wind start blowing, it shakes up your foundation.
Right. Because of the conditions.
Right. Because an identity rooted in black is identity rooted in low self-esteem.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that's what you have walking around this planet, here in the United States in particular.
Right.
You have a people who is classified as black people.
Right.
But that's not the only sin and crime.
Right.
The other crime and sin is that they have to believe that they are black.
And that's the key.
And black means death.
And black means death. And so many people in this country now, you know, they're going on this thing about Black Lives Matter, and I tell them no, it don't, because you know, see when you realize what's that bring, then you understand the conditions of a nation of people who associate themselves as black.
Right.
See, once you do that, then guess what? The ball game is now I need you to grant me some privileges. I need you to have mercy on me. And Noble Drew Ali teaches the Moors. He tells us that you can't expect nobody to have mercy on you that ain't got no mercy on themselves. And so we as from the Moorish perspective, are trying to not only wake our people up, but teach our people how to find themselves.
That's right. Yes.
That's uplifting for all humanity. Uplifting for all humanity is to be able to empower our people. And the only way that you can be empowered is by knowing exactly who you are in this kingdom.
And so one of the things that shook me to my core
Okay.
is that I matriculated through the American educational school system.
Right.
Of course, I dropped out like many of us did in the 9th to 10th grade. But even doing then, we had what was commonly known as Black History Month.
Right.
Now, I'm not a fan of asserting Noble Jew Ali into Black History Month
No, me neither.
with the intentions of trying to absorb him and rob us of our identity.
Absolutely.
But why is it that he is missing in our educational system? What is it about this man that nobody knows about?
Absolutely.
Why don't they want you to know about Noble Jew Ali?
They will June 15th.
Right.
That's going to be our next segment.
Right.
You know, we're going to dive into that. You know, from the Moorish perspective.
But that's part of.
But that's key. That's
Yes.
a key component. What you just
But
said.
dear brother, that's part of the identity theft.
Absolutely.
To suppress Noble Jew Ali,
Right.
in effect, suppresses the identity of who we are that transcends American society by tens of thousands of years.
Praise Allah.
And it is not that the United States government does not know, because they Shriners and Masons walk around with our fezzes on their heads.
Absolutely. And they know the truth.
And they know
Those who are in power know the truth.
Yes. The Messiah, Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall. That is the missing key in the lives of so-called black people.
And
They
so-
don't have the truth of their own identity or national name.
Okay. So, what you're saying is that the black is free. He can't
Never.
be free. Never. He can never be free based on his identity.
Right.
Not knowing the truth.
Of himself.
And you can't be
Right.
free.
See, one of the things you'll find out when you do some research, and they say history is best qualified to reward the research.
Okay.
When you visit the Library of Congress,
Right.
or you visit some of the more well shelved libraries, such like in South Carolina, and you get an impulse from within to
Right.
engage in ancestry.com,
Right.
meaning you want to look in your history.
Okay.
You'll find that the so-called black people don't transcend or go beyond the shores of American society. In other words, the slave holders and the slave masters through the slave trade know that they didn't get no black people out of Africa.
Right.
That black people were made here in the United States, just like you make Chrysler,
Right.
Ford,
Right.
and General Motors.
Absolutely.
They're made by the United States government, and specifically the so-called American white man. He
Absolutely.
made himself white,
Absolutely.
and he made them black.
Right.
So he robbed himself of his own real knowledge of who he is, because he comes from us.
Right.
And in the process, he robbed us of our own sense of identity.
And that is known as a caste system.
That's a caste system. And it exists here in the United States.
Absolutely.
It exists in Brazil,
It's
where there's a
alive.
large percentage of our people there.
Absolutely.
And it exists in India,
Absolutely.
where you have the Dravidians,
Absolutely.
who are also being robbed of their sense of identity. So
Absolutely.
there's a common thread that runs through all of us.
Right.
And that means we got our identity in somebody else,
Right.
not of our own.
Yes.
That's the uniqueness, though, of Noble Jew Ali.
Praise Allah.
That's why a lot of people don't know him.
Right. And that's why we're thankful for him. We're coming from you live, Moorish perspective. I'm with J. Allen Bay. I'm J. Allen Bay. And we're Worldwide Core Radio is allowing us to be able to broadcast the truth. And we'd like to thank you. We'd like to thank you. And we got a big event that's coming up called June 10th. And it's on the 19th of June this year. And 14, 15, 16 is going to be happening. on the streets of Detroit. We're going to have masses of these pheasants. They're going to be representing all the Moors. We'll be representing
Come out,
because
people.
we want you to come out. We want you to know the truth about what's going on. We want to represent and we want to be able to empower our people. So we want to come out in droves and show the world that in 2019,
We coming with our new Million Man March. The
praise
Moorish
Allah,
March.
praise Allah, praise
Yes.
Allah,
Yes.
praise
We
Allah,
come.
praise
The
Allah,
return of the ancient one.
praise Allah.
We're going to see the streets
Absolutely.
flooded with pheasants
All these-
representing
you'll
our
see
history and our
pheasants
identity and
and
culture.
turbans
Yeah.
and
And all our family are welcome to come out and
Absolutely.
support us, and we look forward to it.
we'd like you to tune in next week for more perspective on Worldwide Core Radio. I'm your host tonight, J. Allen Bay.
I'm your co-host.
J. Allen Bay, and we'll be back. And next week we're gonna dive into really understanding who Noble Drew Ali was. Peace.
Peace. And I thank you, dear brother. Peace.